We're back, Buzzkills, and we've got a packed show.
We're breaking down all the ways the bigoted BS bill is actually a de facto national abortion ban.
Joining us to do that is Pamela Merritt, the Executive Director of Medical Students for Choice.
And she's an Iranian Muslim political comedian and host of the incredible podcast, Fake the Nation. Negin Farsad is here to talk about what's got her boob sweat boiling these days.
All this and some of the biggest news from the Abobosphere this week coming up on this episode of the Feminist Buzzkills podcast, the show that thinks that maybe Mel Gibson is Grok.
Ooh, good guess. Or it's Kanye.
Oh, God, that's true. So many choices of anti-Semites, so little time. I'm Liz Winstead, and that was my co-host, Moji Alawodale.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Liz. We have all that coming up. But first, Liz, we have not been together on the pod for some time. What'd I miss?
Just the destruction of civilization, humanity, my apartment. You know, I'm redoing my bathroom in New York due to a plumbing episode. It wasn't a voluntary reno. I'm not going to lie, Moji. At one point, I was navigating where to stay and when I would have to leave.
Your home.
My home, yeah, so that they could start. Because I live in it's like a big loft with one bathroom. I thought I could just do this one day. It'll be fine. And I ended up having to pee on a pee pad.
Oh, no.
In the night.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm just telling everyone so everybody can judge accordingly. Then I promptly moved out to stay with a friend while they are redoing and replacing and
hoping that friend has a bathroom, because it's a weird thing to pee on a puppy pad at a friend's house.
Here's the thing. Oddly, it's now my thing.
Nice.
Yeah. Who needs toilets? But you were gone. I didn't tell anybody where you were when you left. And I'm hoping that you are going to allow us to share the gorgeous picture of you that you shared with us in our show notes.
Absolutely share that picture because it's so good. I went to Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, particularly, ostensibly for a wedding, but I ended up staying for about 2 weeks. And Liz, I had the most incredible time. It was a trip of trips. It really was. My partner went, my child, my mother, and then a friend of hers. And also, like, we just had people there. I saw family members because I'm half Nigerian that I hadn't seen in quite some time. And it really felt like, okay, homecoming might be a bit strong, but just a really gorgeous, gorgeous trip for me. I loved it.
Well, it was amazing. And like seeing you in this Nigerian outfit.
Celebratory outfit.
What is something that folks who have never been to a Nigerian wedding would marvel at to know that happens? It feels like this wedding was a lot of days, or is it just...
No, it probably was. I arrived the day before the main ceremony, so I missed some of but even the day of the ceremony, there were 4 acts, 3 locations.
So what happens? Like, how does it all play out?
We were there with the mother of the groom. And so there was like a mother's brunch that happened. And then there was one room where there was a procession where like the bride came in and the groom. And actually in this particular wedding tradition, there were 3 false brides before we got to the real one. So there are all these like fake girls coming out.
What does that mean?
It was like there were women who like, there were people, dancers who like, and drummers who like brought the bride out. But they were just like 2 girls who came out first who weren't the bride, and the groom stood in the front of the room and had to like choose the right one. It's obviously all for show because
oh my God, that's
knows
hilarious.
The woman he's marrying. And so like, and she was like, the bride is gorgeous, a darker woman. And like one of the girls they sent out was really light skinned, and one was like, they just were definitely not her.
It sounds like a very like, and I'm Janice moment.
Yes. But it was so good. And I went again, my partner was there, my mother was there, my child, my uncle who lives in Nigeria came to the wedding, was invited because I was in town to it. And so we left at 11 because I was with my 9-year-old and we were tired, but the wedding went on till 5 a.m.
You know, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time just talking about this because experiences of joy just happen so infrequently these days. So knowing that we do this each week, knowing we do this work, knowing how hard this work is, for you to be able to go and tap into your joy and really feel it, I think it's important for people to hear.
And I did, and that's exactly what I felt, and I do feel like in some ways I fully unplugged from, like, the crazy that's happening here, and this is not to say crazy isn't happening there, right? Like, I think at one point I was at this really cool pizzeria in Lagos, and former co-host of the pod, Marie, was like, "Oh my gosh, Brad Lander was just arrested by ICE." And they were like, "Maybe you should stay in Nigeria." And I'm like, "I'm in a cool pizzeria with a dude with an AK-47 guarding the door. I don't know if this is that much better." TBD, but I'm happy I'm not there right now. Thank you.
I love that Marie's like, okay, let me just buzzkill this out for you.
If you know Marie, you know that's Marie.
Well, Moji, I'm so glad that you had a good time. And we're going to have one more piece of good news before we get to the casualties of the day. We have a birthday. One of our longest pod supporters, it's their birthday. Lori
Woo!
Horsley from New York. It is Lori Horsley's birthday month. Lori Horsley, thank you for supporting us since 2022. We so appreciate it and we so thank you. And if you would like to support the Patreon, you too can get a delightful birthday shout out from Moji and I. Just go to patreon.com/feministbuzzkills and support. You can get a birthday shout out for, $5 a month. Why not do it?
That's right. And Lori, thank you again also for Moji for joining us and for being such a committed supporter of this podcast. Liz?
Well, let's get to the news dump, shall we?
Texas Judge Matthew Kacsmaryk, the spank bank superstar of the anti-abortion movement, has reversed Biden-era HIPAA protections for abortion procedures.
Critics say this ruling could leave patients and hospitals vulnerable to public scrutiny and potential legal challenges.
As far as we can tell, Kacsmaryk's decision seems to be based on the fact that he has decided abortions aren't healthcare, that women are broodmares,
And will be ridden at the pleasure of their owner or trainer, husband. What are we calling it?
chattel. We're calling it chattel. And speaking of chattel culture, a man on TikTok went viral after revealing the literature he received when going in for his vasectomy consultation.
The alternatives to vasectomy suggestions? Have you tried telling your wife to get her tubes tied? Have you forced your wife to get an IUD? Or have you thought about forcing your wife to get sterilized?
FBK researchers are investigating whether Jordan Peterson is an investor in the clinic or if the guidelines were lifted from a Tate Brothers TED Talk.
Probably both. And finally, file this one under should read an email or just duh. A new book coming out reveals Trump avoided taking a stand on abortion during his campaign because he knew if he came forward, he would have lost the election.
Different pressures from the anti-abortion movement swung wildly from a 15-week ban to a national ban that forced Trump to stumble around the issue like Pete Hegseth at a freak-off.
Ew. Whatever we learn from this book, one thing is clear. The first 7 months of this presidency has been a national abortion ban. Find the falseness. All facts.
I see not a lie, not a single fucking lie there, Liz.
No lies.
Whew.
I know.
Anyway, before we get to the story that we're going to go deeper into, we have some business to take care of.
We do. And we're going to be pushing this a lot because we are so excited about it. So, we have a big, brand new, beautiful training that you can do with AAF. So, save the date, everybody. We're so psyched because we're doing a new Operation Save Abortion live stream from a gorgeous theater as part of Netroots Nation, the largest progressive political convening in America. What? It's true.
It's incredible. It's going to be Saturday, August 9th from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Central Time. And you can join us for one of Abortion Access Front's most successful trainings. It will be an incredible interactive activist workshop and conversation hosted by Liz and I and our programs team at Abortion Access Front.
It's one of my favorite things that we do, and I'm so excited that we get to do it in front of an audience on a stage, so it feels very much like our own personal 4-person TED Talk with all this interactive stuff. So this is going to be basically helping you up your abortion activism game. What we're going to do is walk you through 3 different action items that we do at Abortion Access Front all the time. One that supports abortion patients and providers, one that helps you expose fake clinics, and one that you can take directly to the politicians passing these laws. They're fun, they're meaningful, and they're going to put you in contact with the folks who are really being in harm or creating the most harm when it comes to these abortion bans.
And Liz, for some reason, we always seem to be doing this when the trauma or big old trauma dump comes hard. We plan months in advance, and then it's almost like the federal government is paying attention and knows that we're going to have something planned to help people get through it.
Yep.
Listeners, you'll be able to ask questions in real time and walk away with new ideas to get involved, and you'll have detailed toolkits to execute them all. So, what you have to do is gather your friends to watch and stream at home, as we always like to create programs that are the most rewarding to do with your activist besties.
That's right. So if you want to join us, please do it. All you got to do is sign up for OpSave. We call it OpSave at aafront.org/OpSave-netroots to get your toolkits and everything else that you'll need to make this experience the best it can be.
Or better yet, why don't you come join us at Netroots Nation August 7th to the 9th in New Orleans?
Oh my God, it's going to be so much fun. Now, if you don't know about Netroots Nation, it's like the Comic-Con of progressive politics. Amazing politicians, activists, and nonprofits gather to do workshops, trainings, have discussions, all that help keep you up to date with what's happening in our world in all kinds of ways so that you can plug in and be the change you want to see in the world.
And 2025, this year marks the 20th year of Netroots Nation. So come join your buzzkills for a live workshop and a weekend of like-minded folks giving us all kinds of information and tools to fight back. You can get information about Netroots Nation at netrootsnation.org for all the specifics, how to buy a ticket, where to stay, the full agenda, the featured speakers, everything you need to know.
And there's a Buzzkills discount. What? Yep. This is not a fake commercial. Enter the promo code BUZZKILLS to get 10% off your price of the ticket. They've also got discounts on hotel blocks. So go to netrootsnation.org and register so we know you're coming. We'd love to see you.
We would love to see you in person. But again, if you can't make it in person, join the live stream, aafront.org/opsave-netroots.
Okay, it's time to get to the story that we're gonna break down as we promised.
This story caused me a breakdown, Liz.
It should.
Get us started.
All right. So let's be real. We've seen a lot of media about all the different ways and all the different harms the big BS bill will do. But when it comes to how it's going to affect our reproductive health, not so much. So when we dive into the big BS bigoted bill and we combine it with some recent court rulings, we have all of the ingredients for a national abortion ban that is just being slipped under the radar, and we need to be shouting it from the rooftops. So we wanted to break down the bill and then give you some of the ingredients from some of the other shit that's been happening surrounding the bill so that you can help sound the alarm about what the fuck is happening. So there's really two huge pieces of this bill that really affect reproductive health access rights, right? So the first one is, and this is important when I emphasize all over the place, no federal Medicaid dollars go to any, quoting all over the place here with this word, major provider of abortion care. The word major is going to be doing a lot of work here. So what this means, we talk a lot about Planned Parenthood. They've been kind of getting all the headlines around this when you've read about it, that Planned Parenthood, but also other clinics who primarily provide abortion and receive federal Medicaid dollars for all the other services that they provide, because federal Medicaid dollars cannot go to abortion care because of the Hyde Amendment. So it's barred. So it's basically what they've done is say, look, we don't care. If you provide abortion, it doesn't matter what other services you provide that these Medicaid dollars go to, we're cutting you off. Planned Parenthood says that means it's going to have to close 200 clinics. And that means that cancer screenings, STIs, pap smears, wellness visits, all that shit is going to be out of reach for so many low-income Americans. There is some slight good news around this, and that a judge has ruled this part of the bill, it cannot be enforced because it's just way too sketch and is way too complex. So it's going to be litigated and navigated. But, the courts have not been our friend, or things just haven't been enforced. So we have to wait and see how this plays out. But if it goes into effect, this part of the bill is one of the major ingredients of a national abortion ban cake that we need to examine. I mean, we need to be asking ourselves some other questions, especially around that word major.
What does major mean? Like, does this include hospitals that provide the care for people that maybe might do an emergency abortion when a person comes in? Or does it mean, what does major mean? Where's the definition?
Well, that's exactly right. And when I think about major, let's say you're in a red state, right? And let's say we have a federal law that says if you are a hospital that receives Medicaid dollars, you have to provide emergency abortion care if it helps stabilize the patient, right?
EMTALA.
That's what it says. We've been debating it constantly in legal circles of whether or not it means life saving. Does it include abortion? The Biden administration expanded to send out a little message saying, hey, everybody, remember, it does include abortion. And the Trump administration said, forget what Biden said. We're not sure it really does. You don't really have to prioritize abortion. So when I look at this and I hear major, what comes to mind for me, Moji, in questions that I wish someone could answer for us, and that is, if you're a hospital that takes Medicaid dollars in a red state, right? That has, let's say, only life of the pregnant person or, rape and incest, let's say, right? So they provide 2 abortions a year to stabilize a person or save a life. And they're the only hospital in their county that does that. So does that make them a what, Moji?
Major provider of abortion?
Exactly. So
we don't know, because that
know.
word major is so unclear.
And that word major scares the living shit out of me, because if you live in a place where there's, one glass of water in the desert, you're the oasis. And if they ban oases,
everyone perishes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so I think that we have to really follow this closely, because, with the Trump administration, and when by Trump administration, I mean Dr. Oz's edict to say, let's not pay attention to the Biden administration's stress to these hospitals that you should include abortion in your stabilizing care if you are a hospital that receives Medicaid. That just scares the living fuck out of me.
It's really scary. And again, there's so many, we're harping right now on like what the word major means, but I also just want to pick up the other point you brought, which is that the Supreme Court had an opportunity last year to clarify what EMTALA covers and how it would address people who were in trauma, that abortion is the stabilizing care that they need, and they declined to. So the word major is questionable, and then what EMTALA covers and why and how and when is also a question. And if you're in a state where your attorney general might want to come after you, we already see people are not doing it. But if the federal government says, oh, you hospital won't be able to do Medicaid payments if you provide stabilizing care because no one's clear what EMTALA covers, we're back in that murky gray area of what the fuck.
And also, just to button this before we move on to the second big piece, is, the anti-abortion movement, if you believe that one abortion is too many and is major, they would never apply this to like gun violence in schools, right? But if you believe that one abortion is major, then who's to say the political wings and the attorneys general of these states and all these people aren't going to classify you as a major provider? So we look at Planned Parenthood because they're the front facing and they do have a lot of clinics, and that's who we know. But there's also independent providers. And then pulling back out to this scenario we've just set up, it is one big major ingredient in creating a national abortion ban, where you don't have to make a law that says this is a national abortion ban.
The second part, and this also is terrifying. So just that basically puts Medicaid people out of being able to access abortion. But the bill also bans plans under the Affordable Care Act, which is what Obamacare is, from covering abortion care in certain states that allow people to. So this means, right, red states, they're not covering abortion in their insurance plans. That's just not a thing that's happened. And I want to reiterate, federal funding is already barred from covering abortion. Insurance plans that cover abortion care does it without a dime of federal money. This has been true since the Hyde Amendment. But this bill goes further and punishes insurers that cover abortion by stripping away any cost-sharing reduction in payments if the plan continues to cover abortion at all. And thus, if they continue to keep abortion on the plan, the insurers, the cost of that plan will go up for all kinds of health care, not just abortion care.
That's right. And so what do you suppose is going to happen?
Insurers are not excited to pay us out anyway.
No.
They're just going to stop covering abortion.
And it just gives insurance providers this enormous incentive to say, well, we want those federal cuts, so we'll just dump abortion coverage. And it's not a small amount of states that have abortion coverage in their plans.
Yes. It's 25 right now that either require or permit abortion coverage under the Affordable Care Act plans. And that's half the states, right? That's half the states. And it's a really big deal for the people who live in those states and need abortions. And just so you're just like, well, it's a negligible amount of money. An abortion can cost from $600 to $2,000 out of pocket.
For an early abortion. That's for like early.
Exactly. That's just a standard, simple something that is not needing to get into later care. And the insurance coverage is the difference for a lot of us between being able to access your abortion care or being forced to remain pregnant against your will.
First of all, it was never about states' rights. We're going to send it
Oh,
back
God,
to the
no.
states. Oh, let's have the states do it. This is what it's all garbaggio. So how it works, just to reiterate, federal Medicaid dollars can't go to fund abortions, but states, 25 of them, have decided that they will supplement that care through state dollars through these exchanges. So this is just the federal government coming down and saying, hey, states, we're going to now decide how you spend your money as a state as well by saying we're going to take away this massive, massive giveaway to you if you continue to have abortion in your plans. And so any state where people go for havens or any of it, it's a real fucking mess. And it's like another backdoor scheme that these people focus on all the fucking time.
And at face value, what we're saying is the first point you brought up X's Medicaid people out of accessing abortion at all. And then the second X's out people who can afford private insurance or semi-private insurance from also being able to use their insurance dollars to pay for their abortion. So who's left? The very wealthy maybe can get their abortions. And that's it.
Yeah, that's it. And it just feels like, I guess we need to just have more babies to pick our lettuce and strawberries now since,
That's
you
the
know,
plan.
I think that is the plan. Just raise a bunch of people to do that job. And so these are just like A and B of like, you can't afford it. So you're forced into pregnancy situations that the outcome is not what you want. Parenting, maybe not, but just giving birth is definitely going to be your outcome. And then we've had 2 Supreme Court cases that just help make this hideous cake a national abortion ban reality.
The one I want to talk about right now is Medina v. Planned Parenthood. SCOTUS just ruled about it in June. Essentially, they ruled against the right of Medicaid recipients to sue to see the provider of their choice if the state they live in decides to remove that provider from receiving Medicaid payments in their state. And while when you hear it, Medina v. Planned Parenthood, people are like, oh, this is just a Planned Parenthood thing. No, it's the right to sue for any provider you want to see that is willing to accept Medicaid and see you, right? And the statute says qualified and willing providers should be available to any Medicaid recipient, but there's no cure now because SCOTUS has essentially said, well, if the state says they don't want to do it, there's nothing you can do about it.
And we did a whole podcast about this, and we'll link to that podcast in the show notes. We actually covered it, the oral arguments when it happens. So you can get a real deep dive into it. We did a great podcast with the Boom Lawyer folks, and it was really great. But for the Supreme Court to rule that if you get government funded health care, they get to decide what an appropriate healthcare provider is for you. That opens up a whole world of, oh my fucking God, when you look at Quackpot RFK Jr. as the head of Health and Human Services, if that guy's deciding what legitimate medical places are, legislatures decide what legitimate medical places are, does that mean they can say, oh, if you want gynecological care or you're pregnant and you need some assistance, we're going to send you to a state funded fake clinic that we decide is going to be where you get to go.
Or if you have a child who's on Medicaid and you want to go to a provider that provides vaccines, but the state has decided we don't ideologically support vaccines, do you just lose the right to take your child somewhere that they can get basic health care?
That's right. So, that is a very worrisome thing when it comes to Planned Parenthood was the plaintiff in this case and wanted to say, how can this be? And so when you said, people think it's a Planned Parenthood case, it's not, but Planned Parenthood healthcare providers are a lot of times the only people in some of these areas that are providing SDI and women visits and all the other stuff. And just because they provide abortion Doesn't mean the dollars get funded to that. They get audited every year. You have no idea how much paperwork Planned Parenthood has to provide and prove constantly that they're not using federal money. It is insane. I mean, the fact that they can stay open with the bureaucratic bullshit alone, Moji, is incredible. And when you take that to like community clinics that don't have big infrastructure like that just want to provide care, the whole thing is a shit show. And the other case that I want to bring up that on its face might not sound like it makes sense in this conversation, but hopefully I can bring it around to where it might. And I'm excited because I'm going to put up a hypothetical. And then the good news is next week we have Chase Strangio, who is an incredible attorney who just argued before the Supreme Court in the Scarametti case. He's going to come here and break down some of these cases and the intersections of bodily autonomy between trans non-binary people, people seeking abortions, and how all of this ties together. But so we've all been reading about the case that people kept referring to as a birthright citizenship case at the Supreme Court, when really it wasn't that. Really what it was the Supreme Court ruled that lower court judges don't have the authority if they decide against someone. What they said was the only people that would get relief from that decision are the people who brought the case, right? So that just seems like, how does that work if the 5 people who have a class action suit say, I'm suing on behalf of my right to access abortion medication? It's like, oh, great. Well, then you 5 people can have that. But anybody else who wants that has to bring a case for their own. It's impossible.
It is impossible. Yes.
We looked at this through the lens of birthright citizenship, right? And could you deport people who were born in this country? But we've been having some abortion rulings since that happened that have affected people nationally.
Yes.
There was an FDA case out of Washington. And then there was this Matthew Kacsmaryk, who we talked about in our news dump, who passed this wide-ranging HIPAA protections that were extended by the Biden administration to include people who have abortions. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to roll those back, which led to the state of Indiana this week saying, you know what? Any hospital that does abortions in Indiana, you got to report the data to the Department of Health in Indiana.
And like identifiable data, like really terrifying stuff that people should not be able to access about other people.
But why? Why would this district judge in Texas be able to pass a law that affects everybody if the Supreme Court said it's only the plaintiffs that get relief from it? Like, when it comes to abortion pills or this, why does it affect everybody? I mean, I don't know, but we're going to find out.
Neither of us know, but Chase is going to, the question has been brought, and Chase is going to hopefully bring some clarity for us, because I too want to know how this is happening.
And I would just like to know too, if that's the case, then we need to take cases like that back to the Supreme Court to say, how can this be just okay for birthright citizenship and not for every other case? To summarize, to wrap it up before we get to our guest, how does the big bigoted bullshit bill lead to a national abortion ban? Moji?
One bite at a time, Liz. One bite at a time. I think that's what we went through.
This is my takeaway. They're never going to propose a piece of legislation that says national abortion ban legislation. They're never going to do it that way. They're going to bury it in this other shit.
It's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. And you know what? This isn't even new as a technique for the anti-abortion movement, right? That's what trap laws did, right? They never said, oh, we're going to make abortion inaccessible. We're just going to say, no, we're going to give abortion providers untenable rules. And then it's not our fault they had to close.
That's
it's
right.
the same thing, just larger and done by the federal government. And it's terrifying.
That's right. We're going to cover some more ways with our next guest in the way that this bullshit bill has snuck in some really terrible things, things that we wanted to talk about with our guest, who works for an organization called Med Students for Choice. And what their work is, they help med students who want to make sure that they're getting a medical school training and education that involves abortion care. And they do incredible work advocating to make sure medical schools provide it, advocating for themselves, making sure that they're getting training at if they're going to a medical school that doesn't provide abortion and miscarriage training, that they are going to places that do it. And Pamela is the executive director of Med Students for Choice. And I am so glad she's here to talk about the ways that this bill is really harming our future doctors. So without further ado, let's bring on the executive director of Medical Students for Choice, Pamela Merritt. Pamela, it's so good to see you.
Hi, Pamela.
Hello, it's great to see you both.
Oh my God, we have not seen you since the fall of Rome. And I guess I just want to ask you, just generally, how are you holding up? How are you doing all of manifesting joy and yourself and this nightmare?
I'm taking naps daily. They've really been refreshing. I have eliminated most news from my world other than specific to abortion and family planning. In most part because I realize like I'm a fixer. And when I see things like an organizer fixer is like I want to jump into it. There's so much that I simply cannot. And that was really like dragging me down. But I'm holding on. I'm incredibly disgusted but not surprised at where we are. I'm horrified that really good people are facing the impact and consequences of what some people did in 2024 at the ballot. And yeah, I mean, I keep thinking back if you had asked me in 2020 or 2016 rather what I thought was going to unravel, would not have predicted this absolute crisis. But I also find it empowering to just speak about it like keeping it real, which is like we are not in a democracy.
No.
And I think it's funny because we haven't been in one, but this is really exposing it. Like, oh, wow, this acceleration is
Yeah, I
breathtaking.
cannot kid myself about it at all. So yeah, I've become really plain spoken about it with people who are like, what can I do? And I'm like, I'm not 100% sure that things like our medical infrastructure are salvageable right now, but here's what we can do to try.
Yeah, for sure. And Moji and I in the show, we really wanted folks to profoundly understand what's in this base barbaric bill and how it comes to affecting repro, how it comes to affecting abortion, just healthcare, as a whole. And there's so much shit buried and we aren't hearing about it at all kind of in the news because there's just, like you said, there's volcanic mass destroying everything. So I wanted to ask you what parts of this massive horror show is keeping you up at night?
Oh gosh, thank you.
Kind of a big question, but
I can narrow it down. So the number one thing that makes me wake up at 3:00 in the morning about this bill is that a lot of the really bad things in it don't kick in until after the midterm elections next year. That shouldn't be a complex thing for people to message on, but I've seen zero messaging from the left on that. It's so important that people aren't susceptible or vulnerable to these tyrants messaging that, see, we passed it. It wasn't that bad. We have to get ahead of this and explain that it's going to be bad from jump. And then all the things we're warning about, like the really, really bad things, are going to kick in after the midterms. That worries me. We have a leadership vacuum on the left. We have it both within political party and also within the activism world where people are still operating as if we have functional systems. And, if I had $1 million, I would run constant ads on social media saying that this is bad and the worst of it happens after November, vote accordingly. It would literally just be that.
I wish they could make a countdown clock where it's like this many days until you lose this many days till you lose this. And you could just keep it on your social media thing, like going all the time. Like every post you have, the countdown clock is just there in the corner counting down. I wish I was a technologist that I would make that.
I can't do that, but I'm sure somebody listening can.
Yeah, maybe we should start pushing that. Yeah, countdown clock.
And we would promote it.
Super encourage it. And then the other thing that keeps me up at night is just the horrific damage that is going to be done to people on Medicaid. I was a guardian for 17 years to my disabled brother, and the only way I could make that work was through Medicaid. And Medicaid was underfunded. So the idea that people like my brother won't be able to live independently or won't be able to access healthy food and activities is horrifying. And the ripple effect of that on people's lives, that would have made the difference between my ability to work or not. I stay up at night worrying about that.
I read your story about your brother and I knew about your brother, but you really went into detail. And I did a similar story about my parents where it was the same thing where, I don't know where they would have lived, but it wouldn't have been in a very nice place if they didn't have 5 children who several of us spent our retirement making sure that they had a retirement. And that kind of thing that people do not understand, it's profound.
Yeah.
And that was still supplementing Medicare.
That's right. That was supplementing Medicaid. Yes.
Yeah. And the same in my story, I literally did not, at the point in which I became a guardian, save for my retirement at all. So that's 17 to 20 years in which I am now trying to make up for because Medicaid was underfunded already.
Yes.
I'm so glad we're talking to you and I love that that is the point you think of, but also because you are the executive director of Medical Students for Choice. I think what has been hitting me and a thing that I would love for you to talk about is how this bill also limits educational loans and how that will cut into the potential of doctors in this country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that one because it will eliminate the profession of medicine for the bulk of people who are currently in med school. It's not a small percentage. If you're middle class, you can't afford med school. And I would 100% like to see the government come up with solutions for the cost of med school and why that cost of continuing your education is so high across multiple fields. But the solution is not to eliminate the ability for people to become doctors. We are in a physician shortage in this country. And it's unfortunate that the FDA and this administration, I do not want to say his name, are people who do not believe in doctors. And sadly, we're a global organization. So I get the good, the bad, and the ugly. We do not have, we have the worst pregnancy outcomes in the developed world in this country. So when we don't have good health outcomes, we do have good doctors who are limited in the scope of what they can do because of money. But we will not have physicians. We're already in a physician shortage, and that will hit public health real fast. So think about the combination of policy that they put together. You're not going to have doctors who are first generation, higher ed. You're not going to have doctors who represent marginalized communities where they're less likely to have money. You're not going to have doctors who are middle class and working class and poor. And that means the only doctors you're going to have are doctors who are probably coming from the 1% and therefore do not have any cultural competency for the majority of Americans.
I would love for you to talk more about 2 factors of this, right? One is the people who come from rural communities who have counted on these loans to go to college and provide care, and then whose intention was going back to their communities because cultural competence is so key, and then having these rural hospitals closed so that them going back isn't even a factor.
Right.
Can you just that's a whole, I don't even know if that's a question, but
it's a 1-2 punch and you may be the expert to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenon. So many of the people who are making bizarre policy right now have no connection to the states they say they represent or the good salt of the earth people that they say they represent. Rural hospital closures are a real thing. And there's a lot of diversity in rural America. I live in a small town in Southern Illinois, and there's poverty in rural areas like you wouldn't believe. Thankfully, we don't have to drive 100 miles to go to an OB-GYN. People will continue to have pregnancy. People will continue to have farm accidents. People will continue to have traffic accidents, and they're not going to survive.
And tornadoes and floods.
Right.
Yep.
All of that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I just read a news report about the flooding in Texas that pointed out that, be careful if don't get in the water or come in contact with the water because of pollutants that got washed in to all of this flood water. And, my home city of St. Louis, Missouri, is still decimated from a tornado that injured so many people. Hospital closures, underfunding hospitals, and not providing enough physicians to meet the need are all contributing to a public health crisis. You can't separate these different parts of this bill. It is actually an attack on the profession of medicine that will have huge consequences. It's an attack on availability and access of medicine, which will have huge public health consequences. And it's an attack on rural America specifically, because we're going to have hospitals in cities. They'll find a way. And the majority of people in some of these states live in cities, but you're going to see people die. And it's going to be underreported by the states, very aware. Like, I know they're messing with their mortality rates already around abortion, but people are going to notice when grandma isn't alive, and they're going to notice when a simple farm accident is fatal. I can't say enough about the fact that this is a public health crisis. And when I say that, we were in a public health crisis before 2016. It's not efficient. It's not cost effective. It doesn't function well. It's the most expensive, a non-functioning health system in the world. Everybody else has figured out how to do this. And we act like we have to come up with some new idea.
Right. Just specifically, we were talking around what the big, beautiful bill entails, right? About closing clinics, Medicaid, all that. Then you pull out, and then we have freakazoid RFK, right? Running the Department of Health and Human Services, deciding vaccines are useless.
Healthy people don't need vaccines when sometimes vaccines are why they're healthy.
Yes.
And it's particularly bizarre, as a Gen Xer, I'm looking at this, and I'm sure my other demographic people feel the same way, where it's, you see the regression across multiple years. Like, I got comprehensive sex ed in school. They don't anymore. I got all of my vaccines. My sister got all of her vaccines. My brother got all of his vaccines. He was autistic before he got his vaccines.
Because vaccines don't cause autism.
Because vaccines don't cause autism. And when you talk to people about the symptoms that they notice, they realize, oh, wait, I saw that before this vaccine. But when I think about the world that we lived in, 1945 and before, I don't want to return to that. I don't want to return to people dying from getting, from stepping on a rusty nail. I don't want to return to people dying because they drank unpasteurized milk. If this is a learning curve, it's indefensible. And if it's really him thinking this and doing the policy, we were watching a slow moving homicide.
Also, again, like, these are things that have been studied. Like, if you didn't want to fight education, if you didn't want to just throw out education with the bathwater, you would know this because these lessons have been learned. And we've been focusing a lot on medicine and doctors. I want to just pull out a little more because we know, everyone here, that Black women have become the most educated population in the country, right? And these borrowing limits, I also think, are a naked legislative attack on diversity and equity and inclusion, and how higher education writ large, right? Like, it's going to hit those more expensive professions like medicine and law, but also, like, a lot of Black women become social workers, right? You don't make a lot of money there.
Hey, Moji, will you just briefly tell our folks what the impositions have been in the big bullshit bill?
They basically set a lifetime cap at $200,000. And if you are smart enough to get into a Harvard or a Stanford, that's your undergraduate.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you went to Harvard for your pre-med undergrad and you've spent that cap, and now you can't go on to medical school because you've spent the totality of what you were to spend.
Or the other option is crippling debt with private loans that have no real relief. And so, Pamela, because you work with students and you're an educated Black woman, what are the obvious and also some of the more nuanced ways that this will impact having educated professional people that reflect the community that they serve?
Yes. Thank you so much for this question. Black women have to work twice as hard to get half as much. That's what my parents told me growing up. And that is sadly still the reality. It will mean that we will not have the ability to work twice as hard to receive half as much. So the reason Black women are so educated is because we have to show up with a master's when everybody else can show up with a bachelor's. It will end that ability, and it will have financial, mental health, and physical impacts on people. I don't discredit the idea that they know exactly what they're doing.
I don't either. They seem dumb, but I feel like this feels really pointed and focused. And of course, we know racism is expensive, and this is going to not just affect Black women, right? White women are going to have the same impact. Poor people of all races are going to have the same effect. But it does feel like it's a pointed attack on the most educated population in this country.
It totally does. And then the other thing I feel compelled to add is that people will simply stop pursuing these professions. And the reason we have a physician shortage is because people stepped back from it. The COVID pandemic was incredibly harsh on people and nurses and doctors and custodial staff had major mental health impacts as a result of that pandemic that have been unaddressed because of the culture we live in. So people are like, I can't do this anymore. People are stepping back from the provision of OB-GYN because it now is one that you have a 1 in 3 chances, I guess, of practicing in a state where your work could be a felony. People are pulling back from the pursuit of those specific degrees. When you add in the borrowing cap, you will have people pull back from the entire sector because you cannot become a doctor without debt.
And here's the thing that it drives me wild. One of the things, and that is our health care. We should not be waxing nostalgic about progress, right? You would, in no other place would you be like, I'd rather use a horse and buggy to get across country than the car, which makes it easier. But instead, it's like, oh, why would we listen to medical progress and instead use weird shit that's been disproven? Not even, I'm not talking about holistic, I'm talking about disproven garbage things.
Yes.
And yet it seems to be that we are the biggest idiots with the most hubris.
Mm-hmm.
And that combination is just so friggin' dangerous.
Yeah. It reminds me of something my dad used to say, rest his soul, where he would say, one of the dumbest things you can do is walk by a building and see a brick that's sticking out and pull it. You don't have to understand why the brick is sticking out. You don't have to have the backstory of why it's not in alignment. You might not know so much. And is the building still holding? Then don't pull it without doing some research. We are living in the society that a certain percent of this country and their learning curve have stuck us in. They look back at the history of medicine, and like you were saying, Moji, about people who are healthy because of vaccines, they refuse to believe that something they don't necessarily understand is true. The only reason I don't have anybody in my world who has had polio is because of vaccines. And that does not mean that polio was a hoax. That does not mean that the people who had polio were faking it. That means that science and medicine work.
We wanted to talk to you about Missouri. We wanted to talk to you about maternal mortality. So you're going to just come back very soon because there's a lot to talk about. But what I did want to talk about is the moment we are in and Med Students for Choice. And the Med Students for Choice was started as a response to the assassination of Dr. David Gunn, who was gunned down in the parking lot of his clinic in Pensacola, Florida. I'm wondering what med students, if they're rising again to this moment, and if they're rebelling in this moment and taking action in the way that they did to start the organization.
Thank you. Yes. The reason I can continue to do this work despite the climate that we're in is that med students are committed to being the best physicians they can be. When I would be taking a summer vacation, they're going to work and shadow a physician in a clinic. They're going to get extra training. So I have so many amazing med students on my board and in this organization who are rising to the moment, but we need to understand that they need us to rise as well because they are doing everything they can within the structures they're in, and they need the public to stand with them. So when we say that reproductive health care, abortion, and family planning need to be part of the core curricula of med school education, we need people to say, oh my God, I can't believe it wasn't. Why isn't it? And call your hospital, call people at a med school. You know, we have nothing to lose right now, but our members are organizing on chapters in every single state in this country and Puerto Rico. We have chapters that are organizing to make sure that the skill set is not lost on procedural abortion, to make sure that they understand and the voice of med students is elevated into the conversation, because every compromise we make on reproductive health care limits what they can learn. And we need to understand that, you know, if we don't have clinics that go beyond 13 weeks, they're not learning beyond 13 weeks procedural abortion. If we have clinics where they're, you know, turning people away because they don't have insurance coverage, then that means that they're not seeing the true diversity of the patient base and what conditions they have. And it does matter. People who come with incredible obstetric gynecological conditions, that's a money issue. And many people who are poor let that stuff go. So it's huge, but rest assured that I get more inquiries from my membership about ways to organize than I can actually organize through. Like they come up with the most clever ideas.
Pamela, thank you. This was an incredible conversation. And like Liz said, there's so much more I want to talk about. There's so many more questions on our list.
Have me come back.
We're definitely going to have you come back, and we'll put all in the show notes so that people can learn more about Med Students for Choice, and they can learn what they're doing, how they can support. And your work is crucial because without the doctors of tomorrow, we don't have healthcare tomorrow. There's a brilliant statement I just made. Pamela, thank you. And we will be speaking with you very, very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela, for joining us. If you like what you heard and you want to support Medical Students for Choice, please donate at msfc.org to support their work. You can find them on all of the internet places at MSF Choice across all platforms. And if you just thought Pamela was cool, why don't you go to @PamelaMerritt_SharkFoo on Instagram and Threads. The links and all of her social information will be in our show notes.
That's right. She is a great follow personally, as well as following Medical Students for Choice. She is dynamite. And as always, we always tell you, you can find the best, most up-to-the-minute resources on accessing abortion care and funding for your care on our website, aafront.org. Our Charlie chatbot on the bottom right will walk anyone anywhere in the country through their options and resources for abortion.
We do this show because this info is not given enough attention in the media. So help us spread the word and show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Every little bit helps us reach more listeners and grow the work that we do.
That's right. And now, some fun. It's the party game that's faster than Monopoly and more fun than Taboo, 6 Degrees of Abortion. This is when Moji takes a story from the news, and I have 6 chances to somehow link it to abortion. Let's see if she can stump me this week. Moji, what do you got?
This week, I'm going for some levity and a little bit of dark joy. I don't know if you watched it at all, but the show Wednesday on Netflix is coming back for the 2nd season. And so the star, Jenna Ortega, is everyone's favorite goth girl this moment. And I would like you to attempt in 6 Degrees to link Jenna Ortega to abortion.
Oh my God. Well, Wednesday is based on, obviously, the Addams Family. Angelica Houston was Morticia Adams in the Addams Family film. And Morticia Adams, aka Angelica Houston, I believe was married to Jack Nicholson.
I think that's right.
And Jack Nicholson was raised by his grandmother, who he thought was his mother. And so it was like this really weird thing. But Jack Nicholson is outspokenly anti abortion.
Oh.
So does that count?
I think so. I feel like if you're outspokenly anti-abortion, that means, we hate that about you.
Yeah. 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 He has
So-
made public statements about because he was raised by his grandmother and his mother didn't abort him. And like it was a whole thing. I'll link to the article that I read that in, but it's like, so I've never done a 6 degrees where I've linked it to someone who is outspokenly anti-abortion.
I think if you go to a virulent anti, there's just one more degree where you're us. So yeah, you did it in 2. I say applause. This is really funny. I know you haven't seen the trailer.
I love the series. I love it. I didn't know it was coming back and I'm so excited.
The third person I see in the trailer was Steve Buscemi. And and I know that when we went to an AAF holiday party once at a burlesque show, Steve Buscemi sat right next to us.
Oh, that is correct. That would have been a really fun tie-in directly to abortion access. But I went to some weird Jack Nicholson hates abortion place.
I love what you did. So I think we agree. Yeah, you did it, Liz.
I've been
Unstumped.
tanking it. The past couple of ones, I've just been like, I think I've just been overwhelmed and stuck. So I feel good. Oh,
This was good. This was good.
that's a good lead in. Should we go to our next guest?
Absolutely. Our next guest is a writer, documentary filmmaker, comedian, and fellow podcaster. She's a regular on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, host of her own podcast, Fake the Nation, and she once sued the New York MTA for the right to put up funny posters in subway stations about Muslims, and won. All right, let's listen to a little taste of her hilarious stand-up.
I had to go back to California to visit my parents because my aunt was visiting from Iran. And it was the first time she had been to the United States ever. And I had to go down to respect my elder, right? And so I go to California and I was like, oh my God, she's never been to the US. We absolutely have to take her to eat a taco, right? And my mom is like, oh, that is a good idea, but how is taste taco? And I was like, lady, what do you mean, how is taste taco? You've been living here for fucking 30 years. You don't know how is taste taco? No, I don't know. And I was so mad. I was like, you fucking immigrants, come to this country. And you don't try Mexican food? You're just un-American.
Please welcome Negin Farsad.
Hello.
Oh, hi, Negin. We're so happy to have
Hi.
you.
I'm so happy to be here.
Any story about you and your mom and your relationship is always a win. Every time. I always laugh.
And they're just a fountain of material because you sort of keep remembering things about your childhood that seep out as the decades wear on. You
Yes.
think like, oh, I am 30. I figured it all out. I'm 35. I figured it all out. I'm 4. No, it just keeps going. Things you remember, things that you realize. It's wild.
Also, parenthood is a trigger. You're like,
Yes.
I've seen this before.
You know what else is a trigger? I'm not a parent, but siblings are a trigger. And you go
Yeah.
back to that place in the family dynamic
Yeah.
and you relegate to that role and it's all so very messy.
Well, it's funny because I've been doing a bit about this, but basically, I realized recently, I had taken my daughter when she was 14 months old or something to the playground, and she went down the slide by herself. And I speak to her in Farsi, and I wanted to say, "Oh my God, she went down the slide by herself." I want to be like, "Oh my God, I'm so proud of you." And I realized, I don't know how to say, "I'm proud of you" in Farsi. Because in the 18 years I lived with those motherfuckers, they never once had occasion to say, "I'm proud of you."
It's hilarious and dark.
I know, but also like, I don't know, immigrant parents, like they were busy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's not even that your parents were bad. It's just like, oh, that's not us.
I know. I like had to call my cousin and be like, "Do you know how to say this
And your
phrase?"
cousin said no. 'Cause
She like had to like think about it, just like investigate, you know what I mean? Go back to some ancient texts. It's ridiculous. And these are the things that you're sort of like constantly the trickling of these realizations about your life, which I find really interesting.
I love this story. Nikki, it's a wild time
Yeah.
in America.
Yeah.
Besides the ongoing disdain of your parents, how are you holding up?
Well, it's funny because here's another not to like keep going back to the font, but my mom periodically, whenever Trump, there's like too much Muslim stuff in the news or whatever, which right now feels like a lot of Muslim stuff, especially in New York City with the Mamdani race and all that. My mom will call me and just be like, "Don't tell anyone that you're Muslim. Don't say that publicly." And I'm like,
Does she know about the movie?
I know.
Does she know about the podcast?
I mean, the cat is out of the bag.
Has she met you?
We can't stuff that toothpaste back in the tube. Like it's too late.
Everybody knows.
Everybody knows.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, speaking of that, though, to Moji's point, as you walk the earth as a Iranian, as female-bodied, as a comedian in
Yeah.
America, how are you navigating all of it?
Liz, I've known you for very many years, and you might not be surprised to hear, but I feel probably more optimistic than the average person.
Bitch, what are you talking about? That is not even what?
What? I feel like every morning I'm wiping myself up from the pit of despair. So tell me about this. I
Also,
want to
you're
know
a
more.
one-woman under attack person right now. Like, how is this? Like, you embody the full
I
blown.
know.
Gearing up the black women attacks fully yet, right? They're still like revving that machine.
If you were married to Zoran, that would make it like that would put you at the top, right? That would just be it.
That'd be the full picture. How?
I know. Well, though, don't worry. I am married to a black man, so I'm almost there. But I would say, it's interesting because I feel like, I've been to Iran many times. There's a point I had to stop going because I've said it too much stuff publicly about Iran for it to be safe for me to travel there. And I felt the feeling of AK-47s casually on the street and people with that kind of weaponry tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Oh, why are you wearing those sunglasses? They're too fashionable." And I remember this happening. I was like 14 or something. I remember just being like, "Ah," like, and taking off the glasses because they were too fashionable, but also thank you. You know what I mean? Like these fashionable sunglasses really work for you, like work too much for you. And that's what it's like to live in the Islamic Republic. And that's what it's like to live under like real, literal, constant, everyday fear. And I felt that obviously I haven't had to live with it. I felt it as a tourist. I felt it as someone who visits their family. And I felt it always knowing that I could go back to the land of freedom. And I do think we still have some ways to go before being tapped on the shoulder in that way. And I recognize that, like, for a lot of undocumented immigrants and just immigrants in general, that fear is still alive and the ICE raids kind of summon that. But I think that we have been in dark places before as Americans, and our fallback DNA is democracy. And I feel like we always know how to get back to it and improve on it.
Yeah.
We've seen too much progress and we've clawed back from so many dark places. I feel like we know how to do it. So I feel like we're built for this moment. And look, every generation that's had to do it, they don't want to do it. What a drag. But all of those generations did it. And look, unfortunately, it's now on our to-do list. And now we have to do it. But I feel like we're so like good at doing it. We've done it before. And it's like, it's in our cultural DNA.
Well, and I met you when we were fighting during the Gulf War, right? So comedy, that is sort of when we met each other, and there was very few of us actually responding to the world around and doing that time. And that was a navigational hazard a little bit, right? How you
Yep.
talked about it. There was that overarching, how dare you take on the government, talk about it. And you alluded that, I can't really go to Iran anymore because of I said a couple of 2-3 things. But now, as we're both doing comedy and responding to the world in this time, where it now feels a little bit here like, but I'm gonna do it. But it does feel a little bit crazy. How are you navigating topics you want to talk about? Are you holding back? Are you censoring yourself, or do you feel like, fuck it, I'm gonna go for it because that's what people look to me for?
Yeah, I'm more in the second category of the fuck it, I'm gonna go for it. And I think I have like a weird disposition, which is like I don't feel danger like that. When I was making The Muslims Are Coming, which is a movie that Liz is in, I took a bunch of cameras to the border at Nogales and thinking like, that's fine. Like I just was like, what would be the problem? Of course, we did get detained, and this was during the Obama administration. So we got detained. You know, it was whatever, like 45 minutes or something. It wasn't a big deal, but it was scary. They took our cameras, they looked at blah, 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 you know, and then they gave our cameras back, whatever. It ended up being fine. But I'm like the kind of person I was in Tennessee. There was a bare knuckle boxing match that we drove by, and I was like, oh my God, like let's get in there with our cameras and be like, and provide comedy service. I literally walked up to a bare knuckle boxing match in the backwoods of Tennessee. And I was like, me and this jolly band of Muslims would like to offer our comedy services between matches. And it's like the guy who ran the thing came out, and he wasn't like wearing a shirt, but he was wearing a bow tie to commemorate the occasion. And he ran out and like grabbed a stick that was like leaning against the wall, and he came after us and was like, y'all Muslims better get out of here. In some ways, he was the rational actor and I was the irrational actor, right? Because in what universe is that setting where there's a sport that invites knuckle destruction
And face destruction.
I saw dripping blood, I saw snarling dogs, and then I was like, oh yeah, this was not the right setting. So there are things that I think are not the right setting, and I just don't immediately feel danger about things like that. I'm always like, no, 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 no. I have the gift of gab. Let's get in there. You know what I mean? So I think like maybe I'm insane, but I don't feel like at all changing course on anything that I do or say.
That's what I love about you.
It's actually an incredible trait. Something that's been terrifying us since January is that we've been overwhelmed by friends that we thought had sense, that we thought were normal, not in the fun way you are, like, you know, we thought were normal, spouting conspiracy theories at us like they make sense. Like for me, I've had way too many people, especially when the Senate hearings were for RFK's nomination, who are like, oh, this is great. This is going to be fantastic. He's going to make America healthy again. I'm just wondering, have you experienced any hot new takes of reality since January?
Specifically with RFK.
Yes.
And he's like, it's so interesting. It's like the Kennedy name. The thing with RFK is that he provides a menu, and on the menu is like 42 crazy things and one thing about food coloring. And then you're like, that thing about food dye and the carcinogenic properties of red dye, that sounds reasonable, right? And so then you put all of your hopes and all of your dreams into that one part of what he's talking about.
Into a junkie who a worm ate the rest of his brain.
Exactly.
But then he puts his effort into ending vaccines.
The backdrop is the highest case of measles we've seen in decades, right? A disease we had conquered, back in the fray. What's old is new again.
Yeah. I feel like it's if you are somebody who is in a progressive sort of expanse, you're going to have some yoga friends and some yoga moms who have some crazy ideas about wellness.
Yeah.
Like you can't avoid it. And then their wellness, it kind of just rose to the top like butter, you know, like when the cream comes to the top, it's like, oh, you actually have always led with this, but I just kind of wrote it off as nutty.
It was cute when we had herd immunity, right? It's not.
Yeah. No, I mean, I had a friend who had a blood transfusion after she got the vaccine.
What?
Yeah. She read and heard and was like, the vaccine's going to kill me. And she, you know, she's like, you're sheep. So yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the part that really scares me is that when clear thinking people are like, you know what? I will vote for Trump because of this guy and because of one weird Maha thing that I've heard. And it's mostly Maha. That's where the impact has come for sure.
The other funny thing about the Maha thing is like, you know, the Maha thing is like, take herbs, not Prozac or whatever, like make your body healthy through supplements. But also, if you want to look Mar-a-Lago beautiful, make sure to pump your face with Botox and fillers. So it's like these two contradictory things side by side where like the healthy doesn't make sense with the Utah curls. You know what I mean? So it's such a strange brew.
Totally. But Negin, how are you finding joy in this moment? How are you finding joy for your daughter and just being in the world and keeping this positivity?
Honestly, like I try and have little news blackouts for myself on the weekends, like I don't need news on the weekends. I get enough news during the day. And like I have a podcast, Fake the Nation, it's a political podcast. And so I have to follow the news, right? I need to know what's going on, but also I don't need to know every single day. I don't need to be on all the notifications. So I do give myself a break in that sense. I also give myself a break from social media because social media also makes me feel terrible. It feels like it kind of just exacerbates the feelings I have politically. And I take my daughter out. Like she needs to be out in the world. She needs to be at playgrounds and parks and whatever running around. And I think it's great for me to do that. I take my dog out. I'll take any excuse to take my dog on a walk. You know what I mean? And then I'll be like, ooh, I'm leaving my phone inside. I just take the dog on a walk, no phone. It doesn't cost money to do things that'll like kind of put a pep in your step. And then I also highly recommend planting in general, but also getting involved in your local park. I'm a member of the Friends of Tompkins Square Park, a founding member. I love that we plant, we help our park, which it's a local park in the East Village of New York City. And so there are ways, and like I gossip with neighbors. That's so fun. Like, so find a way where you can constructively gossip with neighbors.
I feel like pettiness could be the thing we don't talk about enough when bringing us joy and bringing us together. Be more petty.
Yes.
I love that. Negin, always with wisdom. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will put all the links to all your amazingness, especially your column in The Progressive, which I'm so excited for people to read because it is that piece of joy that people can read. So thank you so much for joining us. Come back soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
You can follow the amazing Negin Farsad everywhere at Negin Farsad. Listen and subscribe to her Fake the Nation podcast. And for some light and joy, check out her regular column called Hemming and Hawing in The Progressive magazine. Links, of course, are in our show notes.
That's the show, Liz. Woo! Thank you again, Pamela. To support and follow her work, go to @MFFC Choice and learn more about the work they do and donate at msfc.org.
That's right. Now, did we make you smarter? Did we make you laugh today? Show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Plus, stay connected with us on all of the news, all of the days on social media at Abortion Front across all platforms. Together, we can get more people to learn about this assault on abortion access.
And don't forget to sign up for our August 9th Operation Save Abortion activist training. And while you wait for the day, check out and prep by browsing our other awesome OpSave workshops at operationsaveabortion.com. And your super cool activist calendar is also there for you, full of all kinds of local and national actions and educational opportunities. Again, that's operationsaveabortion.com.
And if you want to get more involved specifically with AAF, highly recommend, 10 out of 10 agree. We need you. Sign up to volunteer at our website, aafront.org, and we can figure out what you can do with us together.
Also, man, do we have fab guests next week. Chase Strangio, the ACLU's Deputy Director for Transgender Justice, who brilliantly argued the Scarmetti case at SCOTUS, will join us to discuss some of the recent SCOTUS rulings that affect all of our bodily autonomy.
And we'll also chat with actress, singer, activist, and RuPaul's Drag Race superstar, the one and only Peppermint will be here. So psyched.
So psyched. Also, while you're looking for something to do, why don't you join our Patreon?
Give us money.
Give us money. You'll support great content and get really cool FBK merch and experiences. All pledges support this pod and all of our activism at Abortion Access Front. Pledge at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills. FBK is edited by Remy DeTournay and is produced by Jin Moon for Abortion Access Front.
And finally, we leave you with Louisiana State Representatives Ivey and McCormick. They sound like a vaudeville team. Two men showing their whole asses in this conversation about IUDs that attempts to answer the age-old question, which comes first, the woman's rights or the egg?
No woman would be prosecuted for murder if they used an IUD, and while using that IUD, it prevented the implantation of an embryo.
Well, my bill would do away with abortifacients.
But that's not an abortifacient.
Okay, well, that's your opinion. I don't think that's the opinion of others.
Okay.
I don't know.
So
it doesn't eliminate contraceptives. Contraceptives keeps a woman from conceiving. That's the definition of contraceptive.
Okay. Well, is the prevention of implantation part of contraceptions?
No. Inflation and when the sperm enters the egg, that's when it takes place.
What takes place?
When life begins, that's when it takes place.
I understand, but
And anything that kills that egg afterwards is aborting it.
but
Now,
preventing implantation doesn't kill the egg, does it? Or does it kill the embryo? Right?
We're talking about contraceptives here.
Okay.
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.